Hi, I'm Tim Grimwade, cognitive behavioural hypnotherapist at Masteryourmind.london, working out of my practice at Bond Street and available worldwide via online sessions. So the topic of today's video is a big one, a foundational one. What is hypnosis? And as importantly, in a way, what is hypnosis not? Now, this is a big subject for a short video, so there's a lot of stuff I'm not going to cover. This is just an introduction. Hopefully it gives some clarity and starts a good, decent understanding of what we're talking about when we're referring to hypnosis to help people make good choices about it and so on. So let's start with what it's not and eradicate some of the myths and misconceptions that have accumulated and been prevalent over the years and are very unhelpful in a lot of cases for people seeking the help that they might need in hypnotherapy. To have those misconceptions in place can slow down the process. So let's see if we can get rid of a few of those from the outset. So the first one is an image issue about how the hypnosis looks and the dynamic between the hypnotist and the hypnotic subject. Now, what has been maintained over a number of years, almost going back pretty much to the beginning, the origins of hypnosis way back when, this kind of prevalent idea that the hypnotist has some kind of coercive power over the thoughts and behaviors of their subject. This is maintained a lot by stage hypnotists, particularly, which is a rather different thing. Now, this is unhelpful because it's very inaccurate. There is absolutely no power at all that a hypnotist has over their subject. The hypnotist is simply giving suggestions. It's for the subject to choose whether they want to imagine along with and then adopt the suggestion in the way that we'll discuss later. So there's absolutely no coercive power, no ability to manipulate or control thoughts and behaviors in the subject. In fact, the subject is learning, by doing the hypnosis, learning to take a greater degree of control over their own responses. We'll explore that a bit later on. Now, so it's not the case that a hypnotist who had gone rogue could influence their subject to go and rob a bank on their behalf or commit terrible crimes or do things that they wouldn't normally want to do. It's simply impossible because it requires the buy-in and the volition of their subject. This is a very important distinction, of course, and is important for reasons of safety and practice and so forth. But this has been shown throughout the history of the practice. So we know that it's not coercive in that way. It requires not just the volition and the buy-in of the hypnotic subject, but actually it thrives when they are not passive, but actually extremely active in their imagination throughout the whole process. It relies upon that deliberate activity that the client is bringing to it, or the hypnotic subject is bringing to the process. And if they were to remain absolutely passive in the way perhaps the caricature looks like they are, just this recipient of the instruction, unthinking, then absolutely nothing would happen. If a hypnotic subject at any point did not choose to be responsive to the suggestions of the hypnotist, simply nothing would happen. They would remain completely inert. It requires an ongoing, deliberate activation from the hypnotic subject to be going. The next thing that sort of is a long-standing misconception broadly about hypnosis is that it's some kind of a state, it's some kind of a trance that a hypnotic subject goes into. Sometimes the language touches on this, they go under or they go into hypnosis, and it's actually quite difficult to be precise with the language to drop those misconceptions when we're discussing it. We have to be quite accurate with our language. This is a long-standing, prevalent sort of myth about the area. Hypnosis doesn't really fit the definition or any kind of a workable objective definition about trance or state of hypnosis. Whenever there have been attempts to try to define it in an objective way and therefore be able to measure it and be able to say, well, this person is in hypnosis now, they're not in hypnosis at this point, and so forth, they've always failed. Nothing has ever satisfactorily been able to describe this definable thing that someone goes into. It doesn't really fit that way of looking at it. So it's actually much more helpful to view hypnosis as something that the subject does in their imagination rather than something that they are in. It may seem like a small distinction, but actually it's very important to help people to attain the experience of it and the benefits of it that they may want to. There are, of course, some people who report that they experience it in their subjective observation as a trance or something that's transcendental or something that is very other from normal experience. And that is absolutely fine. That's not a problem. There are some who experience it in that way. But it's not an experience that we need to chase or that we need to see necessary in all of the subjects that undergo this. It's not the defining characteristic of hypnosis. The defining characteristic is the increase in their suggestibility. Remember that word, we'll come on to that in a moment. It's not about how they feel within it. You can feel any particular way that you need to. You can observe it in any particular way. Most people record that they feel aware whilst they're doing it, but very focused on a particular idea in their imagination while they're doing it, rather than being dissociated or feeling that they were in a trance or anything like that. The outcome is likely still the same. There's no problem with that. So there are those that experience it as, they would describe it as a trance, perfectly fine, but there are most people that don't experience it in that way, but get the benefit of it anyway and the increased suggestibility of it anyway, and that's absolutely fine too. This almost answers the next question that we look at, the next misconception that we just want to address, the fear that we can get caught in hypnosis. Well, we're now describing it as something that someone does, as an imagination exercise, and so we needn't fear being caught in hypnosis because there's not something to be caught in. What would happen, perhaps people fear, if the hypnotist begins the process and their eyes are closed and they are deeply absorbed in their imagination, and then for whatever reason the hypnotist is unable to finish the session. Maybe these days it would be a broadband issue. Sometimes, it breaks up partway through and the voice of the hypnotist disappears, and mid-session they're left dangling there, the hypnotic subject with their eyes closed, and the suggestions to stop. Would they be stuck there for the rest of the day, the rest of the month, the rest of their lives? Well, no. It's an imagination exercise. They're following along with the voice of the hypnotist. And so therefore, when it disappears, after a few moments, maybe they think there's a natural pause, but after a while, they'll start to sort of open one eye perhaps and look around, what's happened to my hypnotist? And they realize that the broadband has broken or they were unable to carry on, and they will bring themselves back to awareness of the room and everything will normalize very naturally. So we needn't fear about that. It's an imagination exercise done in a very particular structure with a particular outcome in mind. There's nothing to be stuck in. The other thing that people think about when they're wondering about hypnosis, is it just relaxation? Is there any sort of kind of distinct difference from that? Well, we often use relaxation in hypnotherapy. It's a very important and very useful for many people therapeutic tool. It has massive therapeutic benefits by itself. But it's perfectly possible to do hypnosis without any suggestion or use of relaxation. It may sometimes be necessary depending on what the goal is. It can be used therapeutically, as I say, and it can be integrated, and often is, more often than not, I'd say, as part of the preparation for hypnosis, but it is not hypnosis itself. People look very relaxed, and there were some mistakes made in the early years to think that it was just pure sleep, but it's actually a relaxation often of the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system responses. So it often includes relaxation, it often involves it, we use it therapeutically, but it is not just relaxation. So now that we've discovered that it's not all of those things and some of the misconceptions were not quite accurate, well, what is it then? Well, as I referred to a moment ago, it's a structured exercise in the imagination of the hypnotic subject. When the hypnotherapist is preparing, or the hypnotist in general, it could be stage hypnosis as well, when they're preparing their client, their first thoughts are about changing the nature of how they are using their attention. What do we mean by this? Let's start off with thinking about attention and how we normally use it in a standard day. Our attention is being demanded upon by all kinds of different things around us and from within. We lead busy lives, professionally, home life, family life, etc. But also the attention that we put to what's happening inside of ourselves as well. Our thoughts, our ongoing narratives that we're thinking about, alerting ourselves to things that we need to remember or noticing things. Our emotions, we notice those too, and our physical sensations, what's going on around us, and our senses. So all of these things form a constant cacophony, and our attention is darting back and forth between these things as it's needed. It's very diffuse, and our attention is demanded upon across all kinds of different things, and we're spinning attentional plates all the time. Now, there are occasional moments where we're doing a particular task that's highly demanding and requires our focus at the expense of all other things for short periods. That's the case, but we usually return on a normal daily experience to the demands on our attention for all kinds of different directions. Now, hypnosis attempts to turn down the volume on all of the external stuff that's going on, all of the external demands, and narrow our attention and funnel the attention onto ideally one specific thing. An early attempt to name hypnosis all the way back in history was monoideism, a single idea or single thought, where we're able to just park all these peripheral demands on our attention, temporarily of course, we pick them up afterwards, but just focus our attention on one thing. And at the beginning of it, that one thing is the voice of the hypnotist giving instructions, perhaps for relaxation, perhaps instructions simply to focus on that specific idea, just their voice, and perhaps mentioning something that they want to get the client to then bring to their imagination. And then the spotlight of their imagination, of their attention, is on the thing that they're imagining. Strange things happen when we do this, when we imagine specific things at the expense of everything, all of the other things vying for our attention. We singularize our attention, this monoideism, on a single thought or idea. And interesting things happen because our other areas of our experience start to respond as if that thing were present right now. So what we would choose to imagine in that scenario is dependent upon what our goal is for it. We could do sort of the party tricks of hypnosis, or the stage hypnosis stuff, where we can get someone to imagine perhaps that their hands are glued together with super glue and unremovable and unseparatable. We can get them to imagine that really closely with all of the force of their imagination, all of their attention on how that would actually feel on their skin, to feel the super glue, etc. How would it feel to try to separate their hands, but the skin is stuck together and they wouldn't be able to? And lo and behold, when they're asked to test it, they're unable to, or they feel unable to, and therefore they cannot separate their hands for that time. Were they to wish to drop that imagination, they would immediately be able to separate their hands. It's a party trick. It shows the power of our imagination to experience things that we're strongly thinking about. Now that's a response of the muscles and the senses of feeling how that would feel. Another example of a kind of a party trick or this, or a demonstration of the hypnosis suggestibility, is to get someone to very closely imagine, again at the expense of all other experience, nothing going on around them, focus on that one idea, the monoideism of someone holding a lemon under their nose and maybe cutting through the skin of the lemon, and the smells of citrus and the citrus oil spritz from under their nose, and they can experience that this lemon is right there. Now many people, that will be enough for them to be able to begin to smell lemon and the citric juices of a lemon. They may feel it against their skin, this imaginary lemon that's been cut up, and they might hear the sound of the knife cutting through the skin of the lemon, and lo and behold, they may start salivating. It's more frequently the case than you'd think. Most people are able to start doing this. When they imagine it, they start salivating. There is no lemon there. There is no sound being made. There is no scent, but yet they can imagine it, they can hear it, they can smell it, and they start to salivate in that. Again, as I say, sort of party tricks around this, but the suggestions that the hypnotherapist or the hypnotist in this case would be giving would be suggestions to imagine as if, and then at the expense of all other things that they're paying attention to, just paying attention to this one thing and imagining as if other parts of our experience start to respond as if that lemon were there, or as if the hands were glued together. The muscles, the emotions, sometimes in therapy, we'll come on to that in a second, but the senses and the nervous system response, the autonomic nervous system response, can change. We could have someone remembering the wonderful holiday they had last year, lying on the beach in perfect happiness and peace. Now they could imagine, they could start to feel the warm sun on their skin. Once again, from their sense memory of it, they could start to hear the waves lapping in and maybe the touch of cool water on their feet. And then, of course, their nervous system would start to respond as if that's happening now. It's not just staying in the visual imagination or the intellect, oh yes, I remember the beach, but it has no impact upon me. It would go all the way to a relaxation of the muscles and a downregulation of the autonomic nervous system as they start to deeply rest, as if they were back on that wonderful holiday from last year. Now, these are fun tricks and demonstrations and things, but as I was mentioning earlier, we can use this same protocol, this same process therapeutically. This is what I do, of course, in hypnotherapy, where we can discuss, my clients and I can discuss challenging specific scenarios. Such scenarios where they have to undergo frequently and it causes them stress, worry, anxiety, regret, remorse, a lowering in their sense of ability, a lack of confidence, where they're unable to be assertive, unable to perform at the best of their abilities, where they dread it in advance and reflect very poorly after it. We can discuss the specific situation around it and all of the items that are connected with their stress and anxiety and worry about this thing, and then start to rebuild how they would wish to be in that situation. And then using hypnosis, we can start to then get them to experience that scenario as if it's happening there. In reality, they're sat in my practice room, or maybe they're at home on their sofa connecting online from anywhere in the world. They're not in that scenario right now, but we can use the techniques of hypnosis to get them to experience it as if it's happening now, but with a difference. This time they are coping. This time they have effortless resilience. This time they're able to be assertive and authentic within the situation and perform to the best of their abilities. So what began as maybe a party trick or something to demonstrate on a stage now has its use in the therapeutic practice room. Now, as a tool, it's pretty open and is varied as your imagination will go, completely able to be used in any scenario where it's necessary, completely flexible. So what do we fill that tool with? What do we use it to apply? Well, that's where the cognitive behavioral processes come in, and why I align the two. They work very, very well together. Hypnosis is, after all, a cognitive exercise that happens in the imagination. Now, I hope that that's given some kind of a grounding of understanding of hypnosis and how I can use it therapeutically as well, for therapeutic benefit and personal development, etc. Hope it's given a bit of information around that. It's been interesting and perhaps useful. I'm going to be making further videos where we'll perhaps expand more upon it. As I say, it's a vast subject and there's a lot to cover, but there's just a beginning piece for you. If you'd be interested in perhaps taking up some sessions and exploring the world of hypnotherapy for yourselves, my contact details are in the description of this video. You'll be able to find them there and we can set something up, whether you're in London and can come in person, or whether you're anywhere else in the world. We set up overseas sessions via online work. So as always with these things, like and subscribe. I'm not going to use hypnotic suggestion to make it possible for you to like and subscribe. You can do that by yourselves, but there will be future videos as well, and I hope you can join me for those. But for now, thank you very much for watching.